The massive crystal building stretched high into the alien sky. Inside, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating chairs. Some had 4 arms, others had no arms at all. A few glowed with their own light while others looked like walking rocks. But they all had one thing in common right now. They were all laughing at the humans. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the center of the great hall. His gray hair was cut short and his uniform was plain blue fabric. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress these alien lords who ruled the galaxy. He held a small device in his hand that showed pictures of Earth's space fleet. The pictures were not pretty. The human ships looked old and ugly. They had big square boxes for engines and thick metal plates covering their sides like armor on an old tank. Compared to the sleek alien ships with their smooth curves and glowing energy fields, the human vessels looked like flying garbage. "Look at these primitive machines," said Ambassador Krex from his floating platform. He was tall and thin with purple skin and 4 yellow eyes. "They still burn chemicals to move through space. Our children build better toys in school." More laughter filled the hall. The sound came from 100 different throats making strange music that hurt human ears. Commander Lisa Hayes sat in the viewing area above the main floor. She watched the alien delegates point at the human ship pictures and shake their heads, or tentacles or whatever body parts they used to show disappointment. "Their weapons shoot pieces of metal," called out another alien. This one looked like a giant spider made of silver. "Metal pieces. We stopped using such things before your species learned to make fire." The crystalline collective representative made a sound like breaking glass. The translation device changed this into words. "These humans want to trade with us for basic materials. But what can they offer? Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. We have garbage trucks more advanced than their best warships." Admiral Morrison waited for the noise to die down. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had seen real war, real death, real fear. These aliens lived in peace and comfort. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for your life. That would be their mistake. "Honored delegates," Morrison said in a calm voice. "Humanity asks only for simple trade agreements. We need certain rare metals found in your space. In return, we offer protection services for your outer colonies." This brought even more laughter. A being that looked like living liquid in a glass container rippled with what could only be amusement. "Protection from what? Your fleet could not defeat a single one of our patrol boats. We have defensive systems that would turn your ships into dust before you could fire a shot." The vote happened quickly. Every alien in the building raised whatever they used for hands. The decision was clear. Humanity would get no help from the Galactic Council. Their request for trade was denied. Their fleet was officially listed as no threat to galactic security in the military databases. What the aliens did not know was that Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price was watching everything from the bridge of the USS Independence. The ship hung in space far above the alien world. From the outside, it looked like a flying brick with engines stuck on the back. Inside, it was something very different. "Sir, are you getting all this?" Price asked into his communication device. Morrison's voice came back clear and strong. "Every word, Danny. How are the preparations going?" Price looked around the bridge. Chief Amy Walsh was working at a control panel that the aliens had never seen. The technology inside this panel would have shocked the Galactic Council members into silence, but it was hidden behind thick metal plates that looked like simple ship controls. "Amy's team is ready, sir. All ships report green across the board. The packages are installed and waiting for activation codes." Morrison nodded even though Price could not see him. Down in the alien building, he gathered his papers and prepared to leave. The aliens were still laughing and talking about the primitive humans and their joke of a fleet. "Admiral Morrison," called Ambassador Krex, "perhaps your people should focus on farming instead of pretending to be warriors. Leave the protection of space to those who actually understand modern technology." Morrison stopped walking and turned, back to face the alien. For just a moment, his calm mask slipped. The alien saw something in the human's eyes that made him step back. It was the look of a predator, the look of something that had killed before and would kill again. "You're probably right," Morrison said quietly. "Humans should stick to what they know best." He walked out of the building without another word. Behind him, the aliens continued their celebration. They had just saved themselves from making a terrible trade deal with a species that had nothing to offer. High above in space, the human fleet began to move. The ships looked slow and clumsy as they turned away from the alien world. Their engines left trails of bright fire that seemed wasteful and crude. The alien sensors tracked them until they jumped to hyperspace, then dismissed them from all tactical displays. The Relic fleet was no longer considered worth watching. This was exactly what Admiral Morrison had hoped for. Dr. Helen Carter sat in her laboratory aboard the Independence. Around her were samples of alien technology that humanity had been secretly studying for years. The aliens thought they were so advanced, so superior. They had no idea that humans had been preparing for this day since first contact. "Danny," she called to Lieutenant Colonel Price over the ship's communication system. "The biological studies are complete. I know how their weapons work now. More importantly, I know how to stop them." Price smiled as he looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, ancient enemies were stirring. The Krillian horde had been quiet for 200 years, but intelligence reports suggested they were waking up. When they came, they would find a galaxy protected by arrogant aliens who had forgotten how to fight. They would also find humanity. And humanity had never forgotten how to fight. They had just gotten much better at hiding it. The Independence and her sister ships disappeared into the darkness between stars. To anyone watching, they looked like obsolete relics heading home after a failed diplomatic mission. The truth was far more dangerous. The galaxy's greatest predators were about to learn why it was a mistake to underestimate the species that had turned their own home planet into a weapon. 3 months had passed since the aliens laughed at humanity's fleet. Captain Steve Parker sat in his command chair aboard the USS Defiance, staring at readings that made his blood run cold. His ship floated in the dark space between star systems, far from any alien patrol routes. What his sensors showed him would change everything. "Captain, you need to see this," called out his science officer, Lieutenant Brad Wilson. The young man's hands shook as he pointed to his screen. "These energy signatures are massive. Whatever is making them has to be the size of a small moon." Parker moved to look at the display. Numbers scrolled across the screen in red letters. Each number represented destruction on a scale that most civilized species had forgotten was possible. But Parker knew exactly what he was looking at. "The Krillian horde," he said quietly. "They're waking up." The Krillians were the galaxy's nightmare. 200 years ago, they had swept across space like a plague of locusts. They ate planets, consumed entire star systems, and turned living beings into food for their massive bioships. The advanced alien races had barely managed to drive them back into dark space. Everyone hoped they would never return. Parker activated his long-range communicator. The device looked crude and simple, just like everything else on human ships. The aliens who had inspected it months ago thought it was primitive radio technology. They were wrong about that, too. "Independence, this is Defiance," Parker said into the communicator. "Priority Alpha message for Admiral Morrison." The response came back immediately. Morrison's voice was calm and steady, just like always. "Go ahead, Steve. What do you have for me?" "Sir, we've detected Krillian movement in the outer rim. Multiple large signatures, heading toward the core worlds. Best estimate is, they'll reach the first inhabited systems in 72 hours. There was silence on the channel for several seconds. When Morrison spoke again, his voice carried a weight that Parker had rarely heard before. "Understood. Return to base immediately. It's time to wake up the fleet." Dr. Helen Carter was already waiting when Parker's ship docked with the Independence. She had been studying intercepted alien communications for weeks, trying to piece together intelligence about threats the Galactic Council refused to acknowledge. What she had found kept her awake at night. "The Krillians have been watching us," she told Admiral Morrison as they walked through the ship's corridors. "They monitored the council meeting where our fleet was rejected. They know the galaxy thinks we're harmless." Morrison nodded grimly. "And they know the council's forces are spread thin across hundreds of systems. The aliens got soft during peacetime. They forgot that predators always return when prey looks weak. They entered a section of the ship that did not appear on any schematic shared with alien inspectors. Here, Chief Amy Walsh worked with her engineering teams on systems that would have shocked the Galactic Council into silence. The room hummed, with energy that registered as simple electrical power on external sensors. The reality was far more complex. How long until full activation? Morrison asked Walsh. The chief engineer wiped grease from her hands with a dirty cloth. She had been working for 18 hours straight, preparing systems that had been dormant since the ships were built. 6 hours for basic systems, sir. 12 hours for full combat capability. But sir, once we activate, there's no hiding what these ships really are. The aliens will know we lied to them. The aliens will be dead if we don't activate, Morrison replied. The Krillians don't take prisoners, and they don't negotiate. When they're done with the core worlds, they'll come for Earth too. Lieutenant, Colonel Danny Price joined them, carrying a datapad filled with reports from across the human fleet. 200 ships were scattered throughout space, all disguised as obsolete relics. Each ship carried technology that made the aliens best. Weapons look like children's toys. All captains are standing by for activation codes, Price reported. They're asking if we're really going to help the same aliens who called us primitive farmers. Morrison looked out through the ship's viewing port at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Krillian horde was moving toward unsuspecting worlds filled with beings who had never known real war. The aliens were arrogant and dismissive, but they were also living creatures who deserved a chance to survive. We're not doing this for the aliens, Morrison said finally. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do. And because if the Krillians consume the core worlds, they'll be strong enough to take Earth next. The transformation began slowly. Deep in the bowels of human ships across the galaxy, systems that had been carefully disguised as primitive technology started to reveal their true nature. What looked like simple chemical rocket engines were actually hybrid drives, capable of speeds that would make alien ships look like they were standing still. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Bell worked in the USS Independence's weapon systems bay. Around him, gun barrels that appeared to be simple metal tubes began extending additional components. The primitive railguns were actually quantum-accelerated mass drivers, capable of firing projectiles at near-light speed. It's beautiful, Bell said to his assistant as they watched the weapon systems unfold. The aliens thought we were using chemical explosives to launch metal slugs. Wait until they see what these things can really do. The ship's armor was changing too. What had appeared to be crude metal plating was actually programmable matter that could adapt its molecular structure in real time. The hull could become harder than diamond or softer than silk, depending on what kind of attack it faced. Dr. Carter monitored the transformation from her laboratory. Years of secret research were finally being put to use. The aliens had shared their technology freely, thinking humans were too primitive to understand it. They never realized that humans were actually reverse engineering everything and building it better. Admiral, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the Vorthan Empire, reported Communications Officer Katie Stone. The Krillians have reached their border systems. The initial attack was devastating. Morrison nodded grimly. The Vorthans had been among the most arrogant voices in the Galactic Council. They had laughed loudest when humanity's fleet was dismissed as obsolete. Now they were about to learn what real obsolescence looked like. Any requests for assistance? Morrison asked. No, sir. The latest Vorthan transmission specifically states they would rather face extinction than accept help from primitive species. Morrison smiled coldly. Pride came before the fall, and the aliens were about to fall hard. But humanity would be there to catch them, whether they wanted help or not. The human fleet finished its transformation in silence. From the outside, the ships still looked like flying scrapyards held together with determination and luck. Inside, they had become the most advanced warships the galaxy had ever seen. The Krillian horde was coming, and the galaxy's greatest predators were about to meet Earth's children. It would not be the fair fight the aliens expected. The first reports came in at 0300 hours ship time. Admiral Morrison was already awake, standing in the command center of the USS Independence as screens filled with data from across the galaxy. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. Sir, 17 core worlds are under attack, reported Communications Officer Katie Stone. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she read the incoming messages. The Krillian horde brought 50,000 ships. The aliens never saw them coming. Morrison nodded grimly. 50,000 ships meant the Krillians had been preparing for this attack for decades. They had grown strong in the dark spaces between galaxies, breeding and building, while the civilized races grew soft and comfortable. What about the Galactic Council's response? Morrison asked. Katie checked her screens again. The Vorthan Empire sent their first fleet to engage the Krillians at Proxima Station. Initial reports say it was a massacre, sir. The Krillian bioships just absorbed their energy weapons and kept coming. The viewing screen showed tactical displays from across the galaxy. Bright dots representing alien fleets moved toward dark, swarms that marked Krillian positions. One by one, the bright dots disappeared. The aliens were dying, and their advanced technology was useless against an enemy that fed on energy. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price entered the command center carrying a data pad. His face was pale, but his voice was calm when he spoke. Sir, we're receiving emergency broadcasts on all frequencies. The Council is requesting immediate military assistance from any available forces. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Any specific requests for help from humanity? No, sir. The latest transmission from the Crystalline Collective specifically states that they would prefer to face extinction than accept aid from primitive species. They're calling our offer to help an insult to their intelligence. Morrison almost smiled. Even facing total destruction, the aliens were too proud to admit they might need help from the species they had mocked. Their arrogance would be their downfall. Deep in the ship's engineering sections, Chief Amy Walsh worked with teams of technicians to complete the final phase of their transformation. Around them, systems that had been hidden for years finally revealed their true purpose. The USS Independence was no longer pretending to be a simple warship. She was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. Phase 3 activation is complete, Walsh reported over the ship's communication system. All primary systems are now operating at full capacity. We're ready for combat operations. The changes were invisible to outside observers, but devastating in their implications. The ship's hull had transformed from simple metal plating into programmable matter that could adapt to any threat. The engines had shifted from chemical rockets to quantum drives that bent space itself. The weapons systems had evolved from crude railguns into devices that could manipulate matter at the atomic level. Captain Steve Parker, commanding a squadron of 12 destroyers in the Outer Rim, watched his own ships complete their transformation. What had looked like flying scrapyards now moved through space with deadly grace. Their hulls shifted and changed as adaptive armor adjusted to optimal combat configurations. All ships, this is Parker, he broadcast to his squadron. Full stealth mode is now active. Begin approach to target coordinates. The human ships disappeared from alien sensors as they activated cloaking systems that the Galactic Council didn't even know existed. They moved through space like ghosts, heading toward the first battle zone where they would reveal humanity's true nature. Dr. Helen Carter monitored the transformation from her laboratory aboard the Independence. Years of secret research were finally being put to use. The data she had collected about alien technology, Krillian biology, and galactic warfare was now being fed into weapon systems that would shock both sides of the coming conflict. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy spikes from our weapon systems, she reported to Morrison. The quantum disruptors are operating beyond our best projections. We're going to be more effective than we hoped. Morrison nodded. The quantum disruptors had been humanity's greatest secret. While the aliens played with energy beams and plasma cannons, humans had learned to disrupt matter at the molecular level. Their weapons didn't just destroy targets. They unmade them, turning solid matter back into its component atoms. The first test came when a Krillian scout ship detected unusual readings from the direction of Earth. The bioship was the size of a city, covered in organic armor that had evolved to survive in the vacuum of space. It had weapons that could crack planets and sensors that could detect life from light years away. It never saw the USS Defiance coming. Captain Parker's ship dropped out of stealth mode just long enough to fire a single shot. The quantum disruptor. Beam struck the Krillian ship dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive bioship began to dissolve as its molecular bonds failed. Within seconds, there was nothing left but a cloud of free atoms drifting in space. Target destroyed, Parker reported calmly. No survivors detected, beginning approach to the main battle zone. The Krillian response was swift and brutal. 100 bioships changed course to investigate the destruction of their scout. They came expecting to find alien ships with energy weapons and crystal hulls. Instead, they found something that had been hiding in plain sight for months. Chief, Petty Officer Ryan Bell watched from his position at the weapon controls as 12 human destroyers engaged a Krillian fleet that outnumbered them 8-1. The bioships opened fire with weapons that could boil oceans. The human ships simply absorbed the energy and used it to power their own systems. Sir, enemy energy weapons are actually making us stronger, Bell reported to Parker. Our adaptive armor is converting their attacks into power for our drives and weapons. Parker smiled grimly. The aliens had always assumed that advanced technology meant energy-based weapons and exotic materials. They never understood that the most advanced technology was the kind that could adapt to any situation. Humanity had built ships that learned from every attack and grew stronger with each battle. The Krillian commander, a creature that had lived for thousands of years and conquered hundreds of worlds, watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed by ships that looked like primitive relics. The human vessels moved with impossible speed and fired weapons that his sensors could not identify. What are these things? He transmitted to the Krillian High Command. They appear to be the primitive humans, but their technology is beyond anything we have encountered. Our bioships are being dissolved at the atomic level. The response from High Command was immediate and decisive. Every available Krillian ship was ordered to converge on the human fleet. If these primitives had somehow developed weapons that could threaten the Horde, they had to be destroyed before they could share their technology with the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Morrison received the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The Krillians were taking the bait perfectly. Soon, every enemy ship in the galaxy would be heading toward Earth, where humanity's true fleet was waiting. "Katie, open a channel to the Galactic Council," Morrison ordered. When the connection was established, Morrison spoke in the same calm voice he had used during the diplomatic meeting months earlier. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We are currently engaging Krillian forces in multiple sectors. Our Relic fleet seems to be performing adequately against their primitive bioships." The response from the Council was a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Ambassador Krex, the same alien who had mocked humanity's ships, transmitted a message that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. "Admiral Morrison, the Vorthan Empire formally requests immediate military assistance. We are prepared to discuss terms for a mutual defense agreement." Morrison's smile was cold and predatory. "I appreciate the offer, Ambassador. However, our primitive technology may not be compatible with your advanced tactical systems. We'll do our best with what we have." What he didn't mention was that the real battle was just beginning. The Krillian Horde was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon had always been the ability to make enemies underestimate them, and they had been preparing for this fight for much longer than anyone imagined. The Arcturus system became a graveyard in less than 6 hours. Fleet Commander Hicks Call of the Krillian Horde watched from his command bioship as his forces were torn apart by an enemy that should not have existed. The primitive humans were supposed to be harmless farmers with obsolete technology. Instead, they fought like demons from the deepest void. "Report," Hicks Call demanded from his bridge crew. The organic walls pulsed with bioluminescent displays showing tactical data that made no sense. 20 human ships had destroyed over 300 Krillian vessels without taking a single loss. "Commander, their weapons are beyond our understanding," replied his tactical officer, a creature with 6 arms and compound eyes. "They fire projectiles that move faster than light. Our bioarmor, which has evolved for millions of years to survive in space, simply dissolves when hit by their weapons." Hicks Call had lived for 2,000 years. He had conquered entire star systems and consumed the life force of billions of beings. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was witnessing now. Captain Steve Parker stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, as his squadron finished mopping up the last Krillian stragglers. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years, but the reality was even better than their simulations. "Sir, all enemy contacts are eliminated," reported his weapons officer, Ensign Mark Davis. "Total enemy casualties, 312 bioships. Our casualties, 0. Minor hull scratches on the Intrepid from debris impact." Parker nodded, with satisfaction. The battle had been a perfect demonstration of what happened when obsolete technology met truly advanced systems. The Krillians still thought in terms of bigger guns and thicker armor. Humanity had moved beyond such primitive concepts decades ago. "Helm, set course for the Vega system," Parker ordered. "Intelligence reports a major Krillian fleet heading for the Crystalline Collective's home world. Time to show them what primitive really means." The USS Defiance and her sister ships moved through space with impossible grace. Their hulls shifted and adapted as they traveled, changing from combat configuration to stealth mode. To any observer, they would appear to be simple metal ships with chemical rockets. The reality was far more complex. Chief Amy Walsh monitored the fleet's performance from the Independence. The engineering systems she had spent years perfecting were working better than anyone had dared hope. The adaptive hulls were learning from each battle, becoming more efficient with every engagement. "Admiral, all ships are reporting green across the board," she told Morrison over the communication system. "The quantum drives are operating at 98% efficiency. We can maintain this pace indefinitely." Morrison smiled as he studied the tactical displays. The Krillian horde was reacting exactly as humanity had predicted. They were throwing more and more ships at the human fleet, trying to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. It was a strategy that had worked against the aliens, but it would fail against Earth's children. The second major engagement took place near the gas giant Titan VII. A massive Krillian fleet of over 1,000 bioships had surrounded the planet, preparing to consume its energy-rich atmosphere. The local alien defense force had tried to stop them and been destroyed in minutes. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price led the human response force. 50 destroyers and cruisers dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls already adapting to combat configuration as they detected the enemy presence. "All ships, this is Price," he broadcast to his fleet. "Enemy force is approximately 20-1 against us. Sounds like a fair fight. Weapons free, full revelation protocol." The transformation was spectacular. The human ships shed their disguises like butterflies emerging from cocoons. Weapon ports opened to reveal arrays that defied classification. Hull plating reconfigured itself into optimal combat shapes. Engines that had appeared to be simple chemical rockets revealed their true nature as space-bending quantum drives. The Krillian response was immediate and overwhelming. 1,000 bioships opened fire with weapons that could crack moons. Energy beams, plasma bolts, and exotic matter streams filled space with deadly light. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized instantly. The human ships absorbed it all. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Bell watched from his weapon station as the enemy energy simply disappeared into their adaptive hulls. The alien attacks were actually making the human ships stronger, feeding power to systems that the Krillians couldn't even detect. "Sir, enemy fire is boosting our power output by 30%, Bell reported to his captain. "Recommend we thank them before we destroy them." The counterattack began 60 seconds later. Human weapons that looked like simple metal tubes fired, projectiles that moved at velocities that broke known physics. The quantum-accelerated slugs passed through Krillian bioarmor like it wasn't there, disrupting molecular bonds and turning massive bioships into clouds of free atoms. But the real surprise came when the human ships began to move. What the Krillians had thought were slow, clumsy vessels suddenly accelerated to speeds that made their own ships look stationary. The humans moved through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing faster than Krillian sensors could track. Dr. Helen Carter monitored the battle from her laboratory aboard the Independence. The biological studies she had conducted were paying off perfectly. Every shot was precisely targeted to disrupt Krillian life processes. The creatures that had evolved to survive in space for millions of years were being systematically exterminated by weapons designed specifically to counter their biology. "Admiral, The Krillian command frequency is broadcasting on all channels, reported Communications Officer Katie Stone. They're demanding to know what humans actually are. Morrison stepped forward to the communication console. His voice was calm and professional, but there was steel underneath the words. I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. You asked what we are. We are the species that learned to make war before we learned to make peace. We are the beings who turned our entire planet into a weapon, then convinced the galaxy we were harmless farmers. The battle continued for 3 hours. When it ended, not a single Krillian ship remained functional. 50 human vessels had destroyed a force 20 times their size without suffering meaningful damage. Debris clouds marked where bioships had been dissolved at the atomic level. Fleet Commander Hicks Call managed to escape in a heavily damaged command ship. As he fled toward dark space, he transmitted a message that would change galactic history forever. To all Krillian forces, he broadcast, on emergency frequencies. Avoid human ships at all costs. These primitives possess weapons that can unmake matter itself. They move faster than light and their hulls absorb our most powerful attacks. We are not fighting farmers with obsolete technology. We are fighting something far worse. The message reached the Krillian High Command within hours. The response was swift and decisive. Every available bioship in the Horde was ordered to converge on Earth. If the humans had somehow developed technology that could threaten the Krillian Empire, they had to be destroyed before they could share it with the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Morrison received intelligence reports about the Krillian response with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 of humanity's plan was complete. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of, but they had seen nothing yet. The real fleet was still hidden, waiting for the enemy to come to them. Katie, transmit a message to all human colonies, Morrison ordered. Tell them Phase 2 is now active. It's time to show the galaxy what Earth's children can really do. Across human space, ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers and mining vessels began their own transformations. The fleet the aliens had seen was just the beginning. Humanity had been preparing for this war for decades, and they were about to unleash weapons that would redefine what galactic civilization thought was possible. The Krillian Horde was coming to Earth, but they would find more than a single primitive world waiting for them. They would find humanity at war, and that was something the galaxy had never seen before. The massive Krillian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a plague of locusts descending on a wheat field. Supreme War Leader Gex Nall commanded over 15,000 bioships, the largest force the Horde had assembled in 3 centuries. He expected to find a primitive world defended by a handful of obsolete human vessels. What he found waiting for him changed everything. By the void, whispered his tactical coordinator. A creature with 12 eyes arranged around its bulbous head. There are over 2,000 human ships in defensive formation around their moon. How is this possible? Gex Nall studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The human fleet was enormous, far larger than any intelligence reports had suggested. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that every single ship looked different from the vessels his forces had encountered in previous battles. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Independence, watching the Krillian fleet approach through the main viewing screen. Behind him, his command crew worked with calm efficiency. They had been preparing for this moment for years, and everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Sir, enemy fleet composition is confirmed, reported Communications Officer Katie Stone. 15,437 bioships ranging from destroyers to super dreadnoughts. They're broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. Morrison smiled coldly. Put them through. The main screen flickered, showing the hideous form of Supreme War Leader Gex Nall. The creature was a nightmare of organic armor and razor-sharp claws, evolved for killing and conquest. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. Primitive humans, you have interfered with Krillian expansion for the last time. Surrender, now, and we will make your extinction quick. Resist and we will consume your world slowly, feeding on your suffering. Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. You came to our home system uninvited. That was your first mistake. You threatened our world. That was your last mistake. The connection cut off. Around Earth's moon, the human fleet began its final transformation. Captain Steve Parker watched from the bridge of the USS Defiance as ships throughout the fleet revealed their true nature. What the Krillians saw as 2,000 vessels was actually closer to 5,000. Half the human fleet had been completely invisible, using cloaking technology that made them undetectable to any known sensors. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," came the broadcast over the fleet communication system. "Full revelation protocol is now authorized. Show them what humanity really is." The transformation was beyond spectacular. Ships that had looked like flying scrapyards became sleek instruments of destruction. Hulls shifted and reconfigured as programmable matter adapted to optimal combat specifications. Weapon systems that had been hidden inside false armor plating emerged like the fangs of awakening predators. Chief Amy Walsh monitored the fleet-wide activation from her engineering station. Every system she had spent decades perfecting was coming online simultaneously. The power readings were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral, all ships report full activation," she announced. "Fleet-wide power output is now at maximum capacity. We're reading energy levels that would power entire star systems." The Krillian response was immediate and overwhelming. 15,000 bioships opened fire with weapons that had conquered half the galaxy. Energy beams that could boil oceans and plasma streams that could crack planets filled space with deadly light. It was firepower that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. The human ships absorbed it all and asked for more. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price led the first wave of the counterattack. His squadron of heavy cruisers moved through the Krillian barrage like sharks through water. Their adaptive hulls converted enemy fire into power for their own systems, growing stronger with every shot that hit them. "Target the command ships. First," Price ordered his squadron. "Let's cut the head off this snake." The weapons that emerged from the human ships defied every known law of physics. Quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the atomic level. Temporal displacement cannons that could erase targets from existence by removing them from the timeline. Gravitational manipulators that could crush bioships into singularities. Dr. Helen Carter watched the battle from her laboratory, monitoring the effectiveness of weapons she had helped design. Years of studying Krillian biology were paying off, as every shot found its mark with surgical precision. "Admiral, the quantum disruptors are performing beyond all projections," she reported. "We're not just destroying their ships. We're unmaking them so completely that they can't regenerate." The battle became a massacre within minutes. Krillian bioships that had survived for millions of years were being systematically exterminated by weapons they couldn't understand. Supreme War Leader Gex Nall watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by an enemy that had been pretending to be primitive farmers. "How is this possible?" he transmitted to his surviving commanders. "These humans were supposed to be barely capable of spaceflight. Their technology surpasses anything in the galaxy." The answer came from an unexpected source. A transmission from the Galactic Council, broadcast on all frequencies so every surviving Krillian could hear it. "This is Ambassador Krex of the Vorthan Empire," came the familiar voice of the alien who had mocked humanity months earlier. "To all Krillian forces, you have made a terrible mistake. The humans were never primitive. They were hiding their true capabilities, waiting for threats like you to reveal themselves." Morrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he heard the aliens' words. The same beings who had called humanity's fleet obsolete relics were now explaining to the galaxy's greatest predators why they should fear Earth's children. The final phase of the battle began when the human fleet stopped playing defense and went on the attack. Ships that had seemed slow and clumsy revealed their ability to move faster than light itself. They appeared and disappeared across the battlefield like ghosts, striking where the enemy least expected. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Bell coordinated the final assault from his weapon station. Around him, the USS Independence had transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the aliens who had inspected it months earlier. "Sir, enemy fleet is down to less than 10% strength," he reported. "Remaining bioships are attempting to retreat." "Let them go," Morrison ordered, "but make sure they take a message with them." The surviving Krillian ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, their once mighty fleet reduced to scattered survivors. As they reached the hyperspace jump point, they received one final transmission from Admiral Morrison. "Tell your kind that Earth remembers its enemies." Morrison's voice followed them into the void. "Tell them that humanity's relic fleet was forged in the fires of 10,000 years of war, and tell them that we're always watching." The Galactic Council delegation arrived 3 days later. The same aliens who had mocked humanity's primitive technology now came as supplicants, begging for protection and alliance. They found the human fleet back in its disguise, looking once again like flying scrapyards held together with determination and duct tape. Commander Lisa Hayes met with the alien delegates in the same conference room where humanity had been rejected months earlier. This time the aliens spoke with respect and fear. The Galactic Council formally requests a mutual defense treaty with humanity. Ambassador Krex announced, his 4 eyes unable to meet her gaze. "We also wish to apologize for our previous dismissal of your military capabilities." Hayes smiled politely. "The human defense fleet appreciates the offer. However, we've decided to focus on agriculture instead of military affairs. We're simple farmers after all." The irony was lost on no one. In their secret files, human intelligence officers made a single notation: "Mission successful. Galaxy believes humanity consists of primitive farmers with obsolete technology. Stealth advantage restored." The Relic fleet resumed its patrol, routes, looking once again like museum pieces held together with hope and spare parts. But now the galaxy knew the truth, even if they didn't want to admit it. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been the ability to be underestimated, and their greatest advantage was that everyone else insisted on making that mistake. The mockery had served its purpose perfectly. Earth's children were ready for whatever came next.